Few details of Muhammad's domestic life with his first wife Khadija are preserved, but there's an interesting passage in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal which mentions their custom of evening prayer. In this tradition, a neighbor of theirs tells how he overheard Muhammad saying to his wife, "O Khadija, I will not worship Allat nor Al-Uzza, by Allah I will not perform worship again." Khadija said, "Leave Allat, leave Al-Uzza," and the neighbor adds, "These were their idols, which they used to worship and then go to bed." Remember, Muhammad was also consecrated to Hubal, right? Who? He who is Baal. According to the ancient authority of Al-Qatada, the first son Khadija bore to Muhammad in the Jahiliyyah was named Abd Manaf, the servant of Manaf, or more correctly, the slave of Manaf by Muhammad. Manaf was of course a pagan god. Manaf was an ancient idol venerated by the Quraysh, one of the most important divinities at Mecca. So Muhammad had a son named after an ancient pagan deity. So clearly Muhammad was a slave of, a servant of, and venerated ancient Arabian pagan deities. Let's have a look at Manaf, Manat, and Baal. Manaf is the pre-Islamic god worshipped among the Quraysh and other tribes of northwest Arabia. We know little about this deity except the lists that are preserved by Muslim scholars. From the name it would appear that he was an astral deity. His idols were located in the Kaaba and menstruating women kept away from them. Manat, important female deity of the pre-Islamic period. He is usually associated with Allat and Al-Uzza as the so-called daughters of Allah. Evidence from the ancient Near East shows that this goddess was very ancient. Her name appears in early Akkadian and is one of the names associated with Ishtar. In Palmyra, she is shown as a seated deity holding a scepter and is represented as the goddess of fate. In Arabia, her worship location was close to Yathrib. Yathrib would be, I believe, the old name of Medina, and she was worshipped by the two Arab tribes of that city. She was linked with Allat and Al-Uzza, probably as part of the process of the federation of the cult by the Meccans. But Ugaritic evidence, that's from Syria, has three linked female deities as the daughters of Baal. So this linkage may represent a similar phenomenon. Allat, Manat, Al-Uzza. Earlier we showed that it seems that Hubal, who was the chief deity, the chief god of the Kaaba, the chief god worshipped by the Quraysh, to whom Muhammad prayed, to whom Muhammad's father and grandfather prayed, to whom Muhammad was originally consecrated. He came from Syria. He came from this area, this Ugaritic area. Now we have three linked female deities as the daughters of Baal. They are the daughters of Baal. They are part of a family, a pantheon of gods. Let's look at the symbol for Al-Makkah. We discussed how in Yemen and in Ethiopia you had these temples to the god Makkah. Of course, we have a city in Arabia called, you may have heard of it, called Makkah, that has a Kaaba. But of course there were Kaabas in other places, Kaabas to Makkah. The Sabaean moon god, Al-Makkah, was king of the gods, similar to the Mesopotamian moon god Nanna, also known as Shin, Nanar, Nanna Shin, one of the oldest deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon. The Yemenis, who controlled the entirety of Arabia at the time, who were very highly influential, of course, they were worshipping the Mesopotamian, the Babylonian pantheon. They changed some of the names to suit their language and culture, of course, but it was the same religion. Al-Makkah was the main god for Yemen and Aksum before Christianity, with Shams, Shamash, the sun god. Within the Greek and Roman pantheons, generally the sun was masculine, the moon was feminine. Within Arabia and Babylon, it was the reverse. Moon was masculine, dominant. The sun was female. Now notice the crescent here. Notice the crescent and the star. The crescent moon and the star. Now, in some representations, this might be a sun disk as well. But notice the moon here, the crescent moon, is much bigger. That is a star in the crescent of the moon. You may know of a religion that has a crescent and a star. I'm not sure if you can think of one, but if we try, we might be able to find something about that. Let's talk about Nabonidus and his temple of Shin, or Nana. Nabonidus glorified the god Shin. He was the son of Belshazzar, discussed in the book of Daniel. This doesn't mean he was necessarily the biological son, but apparently this is how this is presented historically. So you're adopted into the family, or you are regarded as. He lived for 10 years in Taima, Saudi Arabia. Yemen is a large oasis with a long history of settlement. Notice it's called Yemen, like Yemen, but this is in Saudi Arabia, Taima. Let's actually have a look at where we can find this location. Have a look here at this map of Saudi Arabia. This is Taima, known as Yemen. Yemen is down here. The linguistic similarity may be important, because these people at one time controlled this region and brought their entire civilizational influence to bear. So in other words, they influenced these people with their gods, with their pantheon, with their religion, with their trade, with their finances. They were a powerful kingdom. This is all the way up here. Here we've got Mecca, Medina, over there. And then you've got Taima right there, within this section of Saudi Arabia. So Nabonidus lived for 10 years in Taima, Saudi Arabia. It's a large oasis with a long history of settlement. Located in Arabia at the point where the trade route between Medina and the Duma begins to cross the Nefud Desert. It is 350 kilometers north of Medina. It was a center of moon worship. We know that moon worship was part and parcel of this region. He was a son-in-law of King Nebuchadnezzar. His mother was high priestess of the god, the moon god, Shin, in Haran, Turkey. His daughter was the high priestess at Ur. These names do come up a lot, so now we're looking at these locations associated with Abraham, at Ur, and Haran, also associated with Abraham. This is above Syria, within southern Turkey, just above Mesopotamia, so up in this region here. Abraham's origin is in Ur, mentioned in Genesis 11, verse 28 and 31, and Haran. The word Yatrib, oddly enough, appears in an inscription found in Haran, belonging to the Babylonian king Nabonidus. Notice that when I search for the word Yatrib up here, it takes me to Medina. This is the city of the prophet where he died. This is just north of Mecca, and we know that this is close to this region where there was strong moon worship, Babylonian moon worship. So the word Yatrib appears in an inscription found in Haran belonging to the Babylonian king, which means he was familiar with Yatrib, which is now known as Medina. So Nabonidus reigned from 556 to 539 BC. He was the last king of Babylon, of the Sumerian Mesopotamian cultures. Again, he was related to Nebuchadnezzar. He had a childhood in Sabaean Haran, which was a major site of worship for the moon god Shin. Haran, as you know, is right up here. Right? This is within Turkey, and this site does feature very often as a major center of paganism. But also, this is the region that Abraham came from. Abraham worshipped stone gods. Abraham worshipped pagan deities before he turned to the worship of Yahweh. But Muslims reject this idea of Abraham worshipping Yahweh. They want the original religion of Abraham. So this would be prior, because they reject the Judaism, they reject Christianity, which leaves us with Abraham being a Sabaean, worshipping the moon god Sin. He rearranged the Babylonian pantheon of gods. At the time, Marduk was the reigning god within Babylon. He promoted Shin instead of Marduk. Here he is pictured on an engraving in Saudi Arabia. Notice you have the snake, you've got the star, you've got this symbol, you've got the crescent moon. And you've got the little wizard's hat on the guy here with his little staff. He lived in Taima, Saudi Arabia, for 10 years. Shin was the father of the gods and the god of wisdom, had the hikmah, and he was worshipped in Haran until the arrival of Islam. Crescent moon flags in the region are traced to Shin, and they are numerous, as I showed in the very beginning of the series. Islamic flags with crescent moons on them. There was also a trinity of the gods. This would be the father, the moon, right, and the bull's horns. You can see that here. You've got the wife, the sun, and you've got the star, the child. We've just mentioned Manat and Manaf, Manaf being a star god. We have the winged, feathered sun disk. which is Shamash, god of justice and morality. And he had the 7-pointed star Ishtar, goddess of sex, love, and war. If we know anything about Muhammad, he certainly liked, well, certainly the first one here, sex and war. So this is Venus, known as Aphrodite, known as Ashtoreth, known as Atar, known as Aptar. Here's Nabonidus again, with this moon disk here, winged sun, and star.